forget what the Declaration of Independence actually said. I'm going to read it so that we know what it says. We just got done doing the last program with a little bit of Fox's Book of Martyrs. You can read that. That'll help you understand why the people came here, the Puritans and those that came here and settled in America. No documents have a greater influence on the citizens of our country than the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. The Declaration of Independence marked with the birth of our republic and set forth the inalienable rights of life, liberty, and pursuit of property. Later, the Constitution was outlined our style of government and defined the rights that are protected from intrusion by government. These documents have been a beacon to all people who value freedom. They are just as meaningful now as they were when they were written. As the American statesman Henry Clay said, the Constitution of the United States was not made merely for the generation that then existed, but for posterity, unlimited, undefined, endless, perpetual posterity. But of course, they tried to overthrow the Constitution. But the spirit of it is still here, right? We talk about both sides. The spirit of it is continuing through the people's hearts and understandings, but there are enemies in the land, enemies of the Constitution that need to be dealt with. In Congress, July 4th, 1776, a declaration by the representatives of the United States of America in General Congress assembled. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator, by Yeshua the Messiah, the King of Glory, with a certain inalienable, unalienable rights, that among those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of property or happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. But see, those rights are secured already. The Lord said, I'll give you the land. In the Word of God, it's already secured. So is this a second way of doing it? It's to reestablish it, what God is doing. Let's hope and pray that what they mean by the Creator, they're going along with the Creator's words also. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, driving the just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute new government. Now that's been happening when the re-inhabiting of the Republic in the year 2010. They're getting set up to reinstitute the old government that we once had with the original Constitution and Bill of Rights. Laying its foundation on such principles as organizing its powers in such form as to them seem most likely to affect the safety and happiness, prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariably the same object, when they suffered like for 50 years after 300 years after Yeshua was crucified, and finally they had some rest from persecutions, the Christians, and then they had persecutions again. So we have persecutions again coming. Forms to which they are kept, but when a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariably the same object evidences a design to reduce them to under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies. You hear what they're saying? Such has been our suffering, our patient suffering. It's called the kingdom and patience of Yeshua Messiah. They're saying We have suffered under you, King James, or King of England, not James, but King George, I think it was in those days, have been patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of our present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over the states. To prove this, the facts be submitted to a candid world. He has refused to assent to laws, the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance. Today we could have had green power in Minnesota way back in the plenty years, but now they're making big windmills and everybody's making a profit off the system that they're doing today. The people that are evil of the world have to get their digs in. They have to they have to rob the people in order to have a system of green energy. They got to get their digs in it. So everybody's still paying as slaves anymore in this modern world today, which we're having right now today. I belong to a solar farm, but I got my own solar panels in the house. They're not on the house anymore. They used to be on a tower in Finland, Minnesota. I started to build my own solar. I got windmills in the garage, old experimental ones that are 220 volt permanent magnet motors. Then I have a 400 watt professional one that I bought, made by a company, you know. But they all work, but my power is not hooked up to the grid, and I'm not hooked up to power anymore, but they wore me out. I'm trying to get the power on in Lake County. I'd like to get it on here in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, put it on my garage, but they want too much money to put the system together for me. So I held back on that so far, but to have your own power, this is something that the distribution and communications, the sons of God commanded to go forth into the world. Distribution of what? Of understanding how to create your own power, yes. To be free from having to pay someone else for your power and having to use oil for your power. This is the right of the people to go forth and do this under the Constitution. But they changed the Constitution so they can control you. They control you through the health system, they control you through the money, through religion, they control you through everything. He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance unless suspended in their operation until his assent should be obtained. And when so suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend to them. He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people, unless those people would relinquish the right of representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only. He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records, for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. Hennepin County court system, you got to go downtown to do just about anything. They want you to come down there and pay for parking in their parking spots. They won't let you go to Brooklyn Center, to other government buildings where there's no traffic, where there's big, large parking lots. The government is actually persecuting the people today and keeping them under bondage, under slavery, under servitude. He has called together, he has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with many firmness his invasions of the rights of the people. Today they do it because of war and emergency powers ever since the Civil War. They've been using war and emergency powers to suspend the Constitution. He had refused for a long time after such dissolutions to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative powers incapable of annihilation have returned to the people at large for their exercise. The state remaining in the meantime exposed to all the dangers of the invasion from without and convulsions within. He has endeavored to prevent the population of these states for that purpose, obstructing the laws for naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrations hither, and raising the conditions of new appropriations of lands. He's robbing the people. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers. He has made judges dependent upon his will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amount and payment of their salaries. He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. He has kept it among us in times of peace, standing armies without the consent of our legislatures. He has effected to render the military independent and superior to the civil power. He has combined with others to subject us to the jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislation, for quartering large bodies of armed troops among us, for protecting them by a mock trial from punishment for any. So that's the end of that page. Wait a minute, there it is. For any murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states, for cutting off our trade with all parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without our consent. This is what today they're doing in our system of government today. They're doing what King George did back then, they're doing today. They should have a poll tax on every home, but not a property tax. Poll taxes were not property tax. They're not based on your property. Because the registration of a residential property is a commercial venue. It doesn't mean you own a private property. You own a commercial venue under the United States jurisdiction of the District of Columbia. So they put all the houses under the District of Columbia, so they got rid of our Constitution and our form of government and put us just like King George, imposing taxes on us without our consent. They have you vote for levies or something like that, but they're making they make bonds, they make loans and stuff. They're spending money without asking us anyway. They set up councils like the Metropolitan Council, which is not a lawful governing body, and also for the companies, the electric and gas companies. They set up the Public Utilities Commission, was not an elected body by us, the people, to tax us, and actually the bills are being paid double. When you pay your electric bill, they're getting another payment. So they work for the corporation, not you. The corporation in the United States. The corporation in the United States is not the real United States. The original United States, it is not. It came after Lincoln. For depriving us in many cases of the benefits of a trial by jury, instead they give you a jury trial, which is ordered and controlled by the judge. But a jury of your peers, that's a true jury trial. For transporting us beyond the seas to be tried for pretended offenses. For abolishing the free system of English laws in a neighboring province. Establishing therein an arbitrary government and enlarging its boundaries so as to render it once as an example and fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule in these colonies. For taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our governments. They recodified the state, federalists, the state and the county governments, the city governments. They've been recodifying them to match the federal government for decades now, doing the same thing in America. For suspending our own legislatures and declaring themselves invested with the power to legislate for us all in all cases whatsoever. What I was saying, the Public Utilities Commission, the Metropolitan Council, they're legislating for us, taxing us, without us voting them in as the representatives of the free people, we the people of the United States of America, the original United States of America. He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burnt our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. He has abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us. He is at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny, already begun with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages, and totally unworthy the head of a civilized nation. He has constrained our fellow citizens taken captive on the high seas to bear arms against their country, to become the executioners of their friends and brethren, or to fall themselves by their hands. You either fight with us, he says, and beat up your people back home, or we're going to kill you. He put them in the service of the military forcefully. He has excited domestic insurrections among us, and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers, the merciless Indian savages, whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions, killing all people. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitions for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. Nor have we been wanting in attentions to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our immigration and settlement here. All the Puritans came here to make a covenant with God. We have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity, and we have conjured them by the ties of our common kindred to disavow these usurpations, which would inevitably interrupt our connections and correspondence. They too have been deaf to the voice of justice and of consanguinity. We must therefore acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation, and hold them as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war, in peace, friends. We therefore, the representatives of the United States of America in General Congress assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world, Yahweh, for the rectitude of our intentions, due in the name and by the authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are and right to be free and independent states, and that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as free and independent states they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and to do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Signed on behalf of Congress by John Hancock, and attested by Charles Thompson, the Secretary. Wow. And here they have told the King of England that we can do our own commerce. But later on they made a loan to get us in control again by the bankers, and then those in England were in control of us again later on, because they didn't want to give up the colonies that easily. They manipulated around that. During the time of Lincoln, they retook us. That's why we're living under the same problems today that they had in 1776. Is America still the land of the free? Are you truly free when over half of your money is stolen directly and indirectly by a legalized fraud called income taxes to support unconscionable spending habits of career politicians and government leaders around the world? And when is our land of the free? Can you no longer drive on freeways and public streets without buying a driver's license and car registration from your public servants, plus giving them the lawful title of ownership to your car in exchange for a certificate of title that shows you gave your ownership away? Remember, the Magna Carta says all the highways and byways between the St. Lawrence and the Mississippi River shall be forever free to the American people without any tax, duty, or impost. There's not going to be any fees on those roads, because the people own them and they maintain them themselves. And there was no need for a second party. There was no need for government at that time. But they used war emergency powers to make us need government. And then they brought forth commerce, and they worship commerce, the prosperity of commerce, when they should be worshiping the prosperity of righteousness, the biblical righteousness that brings true liberty. When your public servants make you pay legal ransom to a private insurance company before you can travel in your car. I asked Minnesota in the 1970s, the Minnesota government, what would it take to have an insurance policy on my own car? They said you need $1 million or $100,000 at that time. You need $100,000 to start your own insurance, and then that would be enough for you to not pay insurance to an insurance company. Well, why don't the people own their own insurance, or why don't they have this? Why is this commerce section of our life pushed off into an insurance industry and not kept by we the people? Because it was taken away from us, the power to insure ourselves. And of course, it has to do with salvation too, because when people turn away from God, they need to be under tyrants. But when people turn back to God, they need to have the power to do their own again. So that's why we need to teach the people in the land to repent and be baptized in the name, not in the title, Father, Son, Holy Ghost, and get all the people into the body of Messiah. In the body of Messiah, there is liberty, and liberty for the nations that turn to God. In our land of the free, you must send your children to a licensed school, or your public service can illegally kidnap your children, confiscate your property, and put you in prison. And when your church must pay your public service for a license so that members can legally worship the Almighty Creator of all nature. And when career politicians, tax collectors, police, and courts are more of a threat to life, liberty, and property than are the common criminals, although those are threats too, they can be very terrible under the housing laws today. When you ask, they can do felonies on people with it, getting away with it under our laws today, under the housing rules. They took some of our laws and put them into the housing rules, and that part of the law should still be under the, like, if people do a felony, it's a felony. If people rob you, it's robbery. In a house, it's not called that anymore. When you have someone in your house, it's under the housing authority. And who gave them authority? I didn't give them authority. Public institutions, maybe the Metropolitan Council gave them authority to do that. It's not supposed to be, folks. When career politicians, tax collectors, police, and courts are more of a threat to life, when you must ask and pay your public service for legal permission to get married, even though marriage is a religious sacrament. Marriage is a covenant between you and God and your wife. It's not to be licensed. It can be registered, but not licensed. When they license it, then 2 signatures sign in, 1 signature signs out. That's not what God wants with a covenant. With a covenant, you don't break it easy. You don't break it in a year's time. You don't break it in 10 years' time. If someone is married to somebody and they get sent overseas for 10 years, it doesn't mean they divorce, okay? Marriage is a covenant of life. And it keeps the society full of righteousness. You must ask and pay your public service for legal permission to get married, even though, okay, in our land of the free, you can no longer practice free enterprise without an ID number which identifies you as a convict, a bully, and buying a permit from your public service. And when you can be jailed for exercising your God-given constitutional secured rights if you don't grease the palms of your public servants. And when you must read non-mainstream publications in order to learn the truth, because the national news media, national news media, and someone knocking on the door. National news media. How much time we got? We got plenty of time. Yeah, we got time. The national news media. Where are we at here now? The land of the free has more political prisoners than most other nations, and more big, expensive prisons are being built every year. You must read a non-mainstream publication in order to learn the truth, because of the national news media only reveals that the political establishment allows its public to see and hear the news they want. Your public servants say a crime needs no victim by claiming a crime is an offense against an abstraction called a state. There's no victim. That's not common law. That's military. Whatever the law needs to do, it can do what it wants. When business income taxes are piled on top of each other, hidden in the prices of every American product, grossly inflating their costs, forcing the industries into leaving our country to be competitive, taking millions of our best jobs with them. And in our land of the free, your public servants can know of most every financial transaction you make and can legally pry into your bank records without your knowledge or consent. Wow. That's not private banking anymore, is it? There's no privacy. When you believe the big lie that your rights come from your public servants instead of from the Almighty Creator of all nature, and when you pay your debts with dollar bills, which are notices of debt you owe to the privately owned Federal Reserve banks, a deceptive name, which pay no income taxes and have never been audited by our government. And when everything you and your children will ever own is mortgaged to the global bankers who own the private Federal Reserve banks and collectible on demand because Congress refuses to do its constitutional duty by providing our nation with a debt-free money supply. When in our land of the free, your public servants have concocted a spider web of over 2 million laws, rules, and regulations, entangling most every facet of your life, although judges on the Supreme Court can seldom agree on the meaning of any of them. And when, if you don't pay your taxes, rent, the real owner of your property shows up, takes it from you, and may put you in prison. When in our land of the free, it's okay to legally murder unborn babies by cleverly calling abortion, and when public judges unlawfully guide the votes of our citizen jurors by lying, telling them that they must vote to enforce the alleged law of the case, even if it violates rights secured by the Constitution. That's a jury trial, not a trial by jury. That's the wrong kind. When the word person is legally defined a corporation, confusing juries into imprisoning their fellow Americans for violating laws made for corporations instead of for the free people of the United States. So I've claimed my real name back to the real person, the person that is free by God to own land, to own property, which must come to pass again because the Republic was re-inhabited in 2010. That is coming forth. Public judges unlawfully guide the votes of our citizen jurors. Okay. The word person is a legally defined corporation, confusing juries. Okay. The spreading of death sentences by AIDS virus is protected by our land of the free, by law, legalized genocide. And when you could be dying from a disease that is curable in other countries with certain medicines, which if used to save your life would be a crime in our land of the free. Laetrile that comes from the seeds of apricots, it kills cancer. If you buy apricots, you can eat the inside seeds, don't eat too many of them, 1 or 2 or 3, and it has a poison in it, but it also kills cancer. If you say something publicly that is not politically correct, the news media can publicly condemn you without trial by merely implying that you are a racist, neo-Nazi, anti-Semitic. We love everybody. The Christians love the whole hate monitor, bigot, racial, armed, dangerous, extreme right-winger, un-American, and so forth. We love all people of the earth. We want all people to find knowledge of salvation. When you say something publicly that is not politically correct, the news media can publicly condemn you without trial. When the federal government pretends to wage a war on drugs as an excuse to make laws and deprive us of God-given rights to life, liberty, property, freedom to choose and be let alone. Well, when crime pays big for big brother government, because every law causes many more victimless crimes and an excuse for much higher taxes, supposedly used to punish the multitude of newly created violators, victims of such newly invented crimes against the imaginary state. And when in our land of the free, the flag now displayed in courtrooms and other public buildings has a gold fringed border, that's a military court tribunal flag, which are military colors, indicating that we are now under unannounced martial law. We've been under martial law since the Civil War. Isn't it time to go back to freedom? It's time for the people to come back to freedom, is it not true? We've been under martial law. The Second Amendment was done away during the Civil War. People are fighting over the Second Amendment right now, but it was done away in the Civil War. The spirit of it is here by this invisible realm. But in the physical realm, they did away with it. You know, Marines don't take their rifles home after they were in the Marine Corps. And the Army don't take their rifles home. That's because there is no Second Amendment, folks. It's been done away with when they made a new Constitution of the United States. And they turned the Constitution around. They made it, was supposed to restrict the government. Now they turned it around. Here's your Constitution. Just keep looking at it while we're behind the scenes making new laws with public utilities commissions, the Metropolitan Council. We're going to attach all these federal things down into the county, down into the state, into the local, and we're going to fix all this stuff so we have more slavery ship. We're going to have a totalitarian state before you know it. That's what they're working on, folks. As you vote for a Demopublican or a Republican for president, a bunch of your taxes will be given to Israel food, which should be given to our needy, given to Russia. Your defense rifle may be confiscated. The USA military put under the United Nations. Your job may be exported to Mexico, and our land of the free placed under the dictatorial rule of non-elected foreigners comprising of the United Nations, which is called the New World Order. If this entrapment is freedom, then what is slavery? What is slavery? So they've done a lot to ensnare and entrap the people. Okay, we're getting to the next page here. A visitor from the past. I wonder if I should read this. Oh, maybe this is okay. Let's see what we've got here. I had a dream the other night that made me understand a soldier walking through the midst with flintlock in his hand. His clothes were torn and dirty, and as he stood there by my bed, with all the dignity that he possessed, he removed his battered hat, and speaking very low, he said, "We fought a revolution to secure our liberty. We wrote the Constitution as the shield from tyranny. For all future generations, this legacy we gave to this, the land of the free and the home of the brave. This freedom we secured, we hoped you'd always keep. But politicians labored endlessly while good men were asleep. Your liberty and freedom have been surrendered, and you are just a slave in this, what used to be the land of the free and the home of the brave. With eagerness, you obtain permits to travel and permits to own a gun, permits to earn a living, permits to enjoy your pleasure that used to be the fun. You claim the ground you live on is your own, and yet pay yearly rent. For if you don't, the state won't grant you its consent. Your offspring must attend a school that programs and cannot educate. They program the children for their new world order. Morality, integrity, and righteousness cannot be taught. According to the state, you read the perverted so-called news dispensed by a regulated press to help your employer become a thief to please the IRS. Sounds like Hitler's regime, doesn't it? All over again. Right here in America, we need to put a stop to it. What do you call money? And God can save all you people that are involved with this present evil government. You can help to turn this government around even while you have a job in this government. I know there's a $63 trillion retirement fund for the federal, state, and county employees, which is more than the billions that Social Security takes in. I mean, only like 700-800 billion or something in 2016 for Social Security. But here they got this $63 trillion fund. That's why you want to keep working for this crooked government, but You got to think of the morality. I used to tell police officers many years ago, I said, your paycheck is more important than morality. But what about your grandchildren? What about your extended family, going back to your grandparents? We have to restore the former desolations of past generations. And how can we do that, police officers in the world out there, if we can't get you to come back and be part of the Commonwealth, the original government, instead of this maritime beast that's come upon us? There comes a time when everybody has to have a valued decision. There comes a time when you have to say no to this government and to this job that you have. Of course, other wicked people come and take your job. But maybe there's a way to entreat the people in this government. Now we have a council of Bishop Dickie Hull is on the sheriff's board. And he might be on the police's board too. But in order to bring the police back into the Commonwealth so that they can bless their grandparents. Their grandparents are praying for them. Some of them that died of the stake in England probably are praying for these young people that became police officers that are part of this system, or government workers, social workers, whoever you might be, and part of this demonic system. And of course, you might be demonic yourself. You need to repent and be baptized in the name of Yeshua Messiah for the remission of sins, that you will receive the Holy Ghost. Then you'll have understanding from God. But in the meantime, you're in a sin-filled a world that's full of sin. But ever since the cross, it was possible for the whole world to be resurrected if they would just turn to Him in repentance. But for 2,000 years, men have been pushing away from God. And God knew their hearts that they would do that. That's why He died on the cross. And those of us that are saved, we suffer with Him because this world does not appreciate us. But it will, and sometimes the world does start at seasons, does appreciate the believers in the world, and will change the lives of many people out there in the cities, in the governments, that you will come to the Lord and come to understanding of all these things, and you won't be a tyrant to your neighbors anymore, you'll be a help to your neighbors. Because we treat you just like the people in the Declaration of Independence treated the people of England. Your king is driving us nuts, but we want to be good in good relationship with you, the people of England. We fought a revolution here. With eagerness to obtain permits to travel, and permits to own a gun, permits to earn a living, permits to enjoy your pleasure, that used to be fun. You claim the ground you live on as your own, and you pay yearly rent, or if you don't, the state won't grant you its consent. I used to go smelt hunting in Lake Superior with no license needed, no fishing line. Now they got to have a license for that. And you can't get as many smelt now because the eels have decimated some of the smelt population. For whatever reason, they're decimated a little bit, the population of smelt in Lake Superior. What you call money isn't lawful silver and or gold. You have to accept useless printed paper so your life can be controlled. You accept the politicians' crimes against the unborn with approval and with pride. This is what we're all doing as sins as a nation, and we need to repent from it, we the people. Yes, you've taken Satan's number because you say without it you can't stay in stride. You've taken his crooked dollar bills. You've tolerated bureaucrats' control so they willfully do you harm. So they know you're sucking up to them so they can do more harm. Hey, let's get them some more. Let's take some more out of them. You've given them permission to lock the temple doors and steal the family farm. You don't stop the slavery caused by debt and usury, yet you claim to honor God in this land that was once free. You know, it says, Lord, we have not resisted against the evil, and we have not won the world yet, but we need your help, Lord. We plead for your help today, Lord, because this is a temptation that is a great temptation over our people. You contradict God's people, let Satan set their bail, harass your fellow countrymen by allowing corrupt and evil courts to prevail. You cringe and sniffle with piety and ask, what can one man do? God's already answered that. Have you forgotten Samson, David, or Gideon, and his few? There's a lady named Michelle McDonald. She's trying to stop the family courts because the family courts are so destroying the family, the children, and the laws about children. It's just terrible. You know, marriage should be a covenant of life. It should not be a licensed thing, lightly coming into it. See if we got your so-called servants of the public defecate upon the oath they swore. They keep doing less and less. and forever taking more and more. Okay. Take your time here. Okay. They support a bankrupt economy by selling arms of foreign shores. On foreign shores. You send your sons and daughters to fight the bankers' wars. Will you regain the freedom for which you have fought and died? Or have you been intimidated for so long that you have lost your faith and pride? Have they really stole your hope and seared the tear ducts in your eyes? Repent and realize that one is more than a million in your Father's eyes. You're not happy being literally taxed to death. Remember, God's your source of life and breath. Forget all the reasons you can't win. Take a stand for freedom and liberty. For if you don't, your gift to future generations will be greater slavery. Sons of the living God, arise and take a stand, for he is still living, and we sojourn in his land. His law reigns supreme in each and every land. You must preserve this great republic and each God-given right. The battle must be fought and won by day, for no man sees clearly in the night. As I awoke, he vanished, and in the midst from which he came, I was ashamed and broken, for his words were gospel true. But now I recognize the problem. It's me, not you. We, each of us, have ourselves to blame that liberty and freedom are bleak and dying ember rather than a glorious flame. We watch in apathy and hopelessness, and sometimes with grumbling spite, as elected politicians seduce away our rights. We watch, get angry, shake and tremble, not really sure whether we are moved to action in the fight or rather moved by fear to get further out of sight. If by our bedside this same soldier of the past should stand, could you with conscience clear and clean reach out to grasp his hand? Could you converse with him and share his joy and pain as you felt his soul appreciation that he had not died in vain? Or would you be like him, broken and ashamed, and far too humiliated to even ask his name? What would be your answer if he asked you about the rights for which he had died and the heritage passed on to you? Could you stand straight and tall and look him in the eye and give him all those reasons? Excuses such as one guy can't do much against the system. You can't fight City Hall. If we don't do what we're told, we might go to jail. How would you respond to the untold thousands who are asking from their grave, what have you done with liberty and freedom that we died to save? See, they died so that we could prepare the way for the Lord. He's coming for a church, a bride, without spot, without wrinkle. And are you still occupying the land of the free and the home of the brave? Or has it, as we heard, become the land of the free and the home of the slave? Wow. If you can't sleep, it's time to wake up. If you can't sleep, it's time to wake up. You know, to secure a land patent, it talks about in the Bible that God gives us the land. He gave us the land. Let's read a little bit about, we got some time left here. We got 19 minutes, probably 15 minutes. The legal team recognized how evil and corrupt our federal government had become, and to counteract this, they added some provisions in the settlement to bring the government back under control. First, they would have to be paid using a lawful currency backed by gold and silver, as the Constitution dictates. This would eliminate inflation and gyrating economic cycles created by the Federal Reserve System. You ever see a tree grow with cycles? No. If they got water, rain, and sun, it just grows and it doesn't have inflation. It grows every year. Second, they would be required to go back to common law instead of admiralty law under the gold fringe flags. Under common law, if there is no damage or harm done to them, then there is no violation of the law. This would eliminate millions of laws which are used to control the masses and protect corrupt politicians. If we would just follow some of the laws of God's Bible, that would help a lot of situations for people versus these laws which are made to make people slaves. There's a lot of Old Testament laws that are very good for people, even more than the Ten Commandments that would help us. Like, for instance, having a sheriff for over 1,000 families. That's what the word sheriff means, a governor over 1,000 families. A sheriff shouldn't be just over a county. We should have one for 1,000 families, and the control be lower in the local government, more, with the Lord's permission. This would eliminate millions of laws which are used to control the masses and protect corrupt politicians. Lastly, the IRS would have to be dismantled and replaced with a national sales tax. This is the basis of the Nazar law. When the legal team finally netted on a figure, each individual would receive an average of $20 million payout per claim, multiplied by a total of 336,000 claims that were filed against the U.S. federal government. The total payout would come to a staggering $6.6 trillion. I think this has to do with the farmers. This change began in the mid-1970s when the federal land bank illegally forced on farmers mortgages all throughout the Midwest. In each of these cases, the farmers were defrauded by the banks with the approval of the Federal Reserve System. These court cases would eventually become known as the Farmer Claims Program. In 1978, an elderly ranch farmer in Colorado purchased a farm with a loan from the Federal Land Bank. After he died, the property was passed on to his son, Roy Schwasinger Jr., who was a retired military general. Soon after, the Federal Land Bank officer, a federal marshal, appeared on his property and informed him the bank was foreclosing on his farm and to vacate within 30 days. Without his knowledge, his deceased father signed a stipulation which reverted the property back to the Federal Land Bank in the event of the borrower's death. Outraged, Roy Schwasinger filed a class action lawsuit in the Denver federal court system, but the case didn't go very far, and the suit was dismissed from filing incorrectly. This began Roy Schwasinger's investigation into the inner workings of the banking system. In 1982, he was given a contract by the U.S. Senate and later Supreme Court to investigate banking fraud. But because he was under a strict non-disclosure order, he was not allowed to tell the media what he discovered. In the late 80s, he began sharing his knowledge with others, including high-ranking military personnel who helped him bring about a class action lawsuit against the federal powers. See, they don't let it go out to the press because it can protect the wicked can protect their people that are when these things come to pass. See, the first series of these lawsuits began in the mid-1980s when William and Shirley Bakersfield of Fort Collins, Colorado, were involved in a bankruptcy case with the First Interstate Bank of Fort Collins, who was trying to foreclose on their farm. At a restaurant, their lawyer informed them that he would no longer be able to help them and walked off. Overhearing their conversation, Roy Schwasinger offered his advice on how to appeal the case in bankruptcy court. So in 1987, they filed an appeal, case number 87-C716, with the United States District Court of Colorado. On November 3, 1988, the Denver federal court system ruled that Indeed Banks had defrauded the Bakersfields and proceeded to reverse its bankruptcy decision. But when the foreclosed property was not returned, they filed a new lawsuit. Eventually, 23 other farmers, ranchers, and Indians swindled by the banks in the same manner would join the case. This became known as the I just read it, Nesar Law, Nesary, A-R-A. You find out where it talks about that now. It's in the back page here, because it came off the staples. Federal and State Bureau of Records, okay. Because we're limited on time, I'm trying to get back to that. Executive order, okay, this is President George Bush did this. The legal team sought assistance from a small group of benevolent visionaries, military generals. They finally come to, the case was brought to the Supreme Court, and Senate Finance Committee with Senator Sam Nunn was working with Roy Schwasinger with the help of convert congressional political pressure. George W. Bush, H.W. Bush issued an executive order on October 23, 1991, which provided a provision allowing anyone who has a claim against the federal government to receive payment as long as within the rules of the original format of the case. The executive order number 12778, Principles of Ethic Conduct for Government Officers and Employees. According to the Federal Reserve Act of 1930, all present and succeeding debts against the U.S. Treasury must be assumed by the Federal Reserve. Thus, the Farmers Claims legal team was able to use the executive order to not only force the Federal Reserve to pay out the damages in a gold-backed currency, but also allow them to receive legal ownership over the bankruptcy of the United States Incorporated. To correct damages, the farmers' legal team used an obscure attachment to the 14th Amendment, which most people are not aware of. After the Civil War, the government allowed citizens to claim a payment. I have time left. I have time. I have 2 hours. This is the second program. I'm sorry. You need the room?
No, I need the signal.
Signal? Oh, I'm just about done. 10 more minutes.
Okay, 4?
10, 5 minutes. 10 to 5 minutes, yeah. I'll be done. Federal Reserve to pay out damages in a gold-backed currency. Allowed citizens to claim a payment on anyone who suffered damages as a result of federal government failing to protect its citizens from harm or damages by a foreign government. President Grant had this attachment sealed from public eyes, but somehow the farmers' legal team got a hold of it. Let's read that again. After the Civil War, the government allowed citizens to claim a payment on anyone who suffered damages as a result of the federal government failing to protect its citizens from harm or damages by a foreign government. If you listen to that carefully, it specifies damage by a foreign government. That foreign government is the corporate federal government, which has been masquerading to the public as a constitutional government. Remembering this goes back to the original Act of 1871 and the Treating with the Enemies Act of 1933, which defines all citizens as enemy combatants under the federal system known as the United States. It was a fake United States, okay? The Justice and Farmers Legal Team recognized how evil and corrupt the federal government became. That's right, I started reading about this here. Where they get a $20 million payout per claim, multiplied by a total of 336 million claims. 336,000 claims that were filed against the U.S. federal government. These were the farmers and different people that were defrauded, getting restored. And this happened back in the Bush's day. We don't have time to go on this because they want the lead on the TV here, so we're going to end the program quickly here. I think I have less than an hour. Yeah, probably maybe 50, 55 minutes for this program so far. We're going to read one more paper, that'll cut us off to the end. To secure a land patent. We represent, the biblical order for land is that God gives you the land, but we present the following in hope that you will educate yourself with the truth and prepare yourself to stand as our forefathers did, as the founding fathers of this nation did, with your land, liberty, and rights intact. By definition, a land patent is the only form of proof of absolute title to land in the United States of America. A patent is the highest evidence of title that is conclusive as against the government. It's not the real original giver of the land, but it's a copy. It's a registration of what is the ownership, okay? If God gave it, then this land patent is saying that God gave you the land, okay? The patent is the highest evidence of title. But ownership and title are two different things. Ownership is living on the land, owning it, controlling it. Title, and is conclusive as against the government and all claiming under junior patents or titles, U.S. State versus Stone. The patent and grant of land is a public law standing on the statute books of the state and is noticed to every subsequent purchaser under the conflicting sale made afterward. State statutes that give less authoritative ownership of title than the patent cannot even be brought into federal court. Land patents are granted to the named party and to their heirs and assigned forever. Now, if I got the land from him, he assigned it to me, but he assigned it to me personally, but not in the courts. The courts don't recognize that, but he can assign it to me personally. It's still land, and it's still a patent. Therefore, to secure ownership of, but the government doesn't recognize it today because the government today is maritime. It's a different government. Therefore, to secure ownership of land, you must have a proper chain of title secured to your acceptance of your property assigned underlying land patent, or you could lose your land in a land contest. The following steps are the steps we follow to secure the proper documents to accomplish this. We use our copyrighted forms, which we cannot publish here because there are so many unscrupulous people that would use these forms incorrectly. These forms are only available from the team law directly. With the exception of our finding outset copyrighted forms, the following steps are the steps followed by the person seeking to perfect their title with their acceptance of the land patent related to it. First, you must have evidence of your right to the land, warranty deed, a well-supported quitclaim deed, documented assignment, inheritance from a family member who owned the land. In any land rights battle, the complete chain of title is necessary so we can always secure the entire chain, going back to the patent. But the patent is also, when they say the Constitution, we are endowed by our creative to own property. That's the ownership of the property. The patent is just saying that we have a record of your ownership. But the record of the ownership is not the ownership. The ownership is the ownership of the property. You understand that? That's what has to be said about the law. The law is fictitious in many forms when it comes to the laws of God and our common law, Christian common law. Okay, we're going to sign off now on YouTube, and bless you out there. Hope this has helped many people out there. In the name of Yeshua.